Not a good time to lose one's head.
Indeed.
That's not the way to get ahead in life.
No.
It's a shame he wasn't more headstrong. He'll never be the head of a major corporation.
Okay, that'll do.
Okay?
Tune up, level up your fun, tune up. Your quest has now begun, tune up. We'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up.
I promise you it was not coordinated, but I tell you, Mark, I've been watching Austin Powers this week, and that movie feels like it's both dated and holds up well.
God, it's great. Like, so funny. So funny. You know what? It's great. I was watching something about him talking about Austin Powers and kind of the joke process in there. He likes to beat a joke till it's not funny anymore, and then keep telling the joke until you start laughing again.
Yeah.
Like you've killed it, and then he somehow revives it, and it just becomes funnier.
Mike Myers is a special comedic talent. One of the things I noticed is that he would let a take go until it got a little uncomfortable. No, he's going to sit there and you're going to watch it. So
Good stuff.
welcome back to Tabletop Tune-Up. This week, we are going to talk about going critical. Critical tables, critical cards, critical dice damage, all kinds of critical things can happen if there's a special success. My name is Ben Dyer. I'm here with my co-host, Mark Lehman, as always.
Hello. It's time to talk about crits.
Mark, some people might wonder why it is that you would talk about this concept. When we think about the pros and cons here, like why wouldn't somebody want to crit? I mean, I love the idea of when I roll a natural 20 or when I roll, whatever the relevant dice mechanic is, that all of a sudden now I am doing extra special. I'm doing a great job. Whatever it is, I've got my moment of glory.
As a GM, it adds that kind of narrative flair to action. Get some good highs that you wouldn't normally get. So you get these emotional peaks. And if you use crit fumbles, you get those valleys as well.
Yeah, I think people that don't like critical tables, they tend to be people who also don't like it being done to them. It can be kind of demoralizing when you take a crit.
It certainly can. It can be humbling. But, a lot of times on the con side for GMs, a crit can add a lot of chaos and something unpredictable to the table. And if you're like not good at managing that kind of chaos, maybe just taking crits out makes the game flow a little easier for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways people do crits. So let's talk about some of those options, because if you're thinking to yourself, well, hey, I might need to make some adjustments, or I'm not really sure how to manage that table chaos. The good news is if one version of criticals doesn't work for you, there might be others that do. So let's actually kind of work our way down the list here. We've got some different ideas for how criticals show up, and this is drawn from all kinds of different games. And for my money, I think they're interchangeable, right? Like in D&D, a crit is normally extra damage, but you could change it for a different kind of mechanic if you wanted to.
I can't think of something in the game that's probably more house ruled than crits.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, it seems like people have various ways they handle crits. Yeah, let's talk about some of those.
One way that they do that, as we've just mentioned, is with extra damage. So let's say you roll whatever your top dice result would be to hit, then extra damage is a way to do that. You can roll more dice. You can do extra fixed static damage. There's lots of different options here.
Like the classic, 5e D&D is that you double the dice that you roll. Now, I even seen house rules where people say we max the first dice just so you don't have that little bit of famine in that second dice.
Right. Yeah. If you've got a 1d6 damage strike and then you roll 2d6 and you roll 2 1s. It feels like you have a kind of anticlimactic crit if you do damage that is lower than the top end of the unmodified range.
So that's something I see quite often though, where they just max the first dice just so
Yeah.
you hit a baseline, so you don't get that exact kind of feeling that you just described.
Another thing people do is they'll have critical tables, or I've also seen critical card decks. The idea is you've got essentially kind of a randomized but also escalating level of critical damage that somebody might take. So
Yeah.
kind of the classic example of this was in Rollmaster, but I've also seen this done in the FFG Star Wars where they do criticals there. And when you hit critically, you're going to roll some dice, and then the higher the dice value is, the more critical that critical strike is. And it might be something like you knock somebody's head off, or you break their knee, or you do all kinds of, they had all kinds of, in Rollmaster, all kinds of like strange anatomical effects. On the low side, it could be something like, you knock the wind out of them. It's not like you did extra damage, but it does take them off their game for a minute, and maybe they lose a couple extra, stress, or they lose a couple extra something that regenerates quickly.
And I think that's the point. A little bit of extra flavor to some of these actions.
Rollmaster had a really interesting mechanical thing that they did though too, right? Because normally they were a percentile based crit chart.
Yes.
So you could go from like 1 to 100. And typically I think they were in bands of like maybe 5 points or something like that. But Mark, they had something extra that they did too. Why don't you talk about what exploding dice did to that table?
Rollmaster did have an upper echelon where if you rolled like in the 90s, the chart extended up to potentially much higher. I think it went to like 200.
If you rolled like a 96 or between 96 and 100 basically, so that last 5%, you'd roll the percentile dice again, and then that total would be your new crit number. And so you could get really high numbers, especially if you did it twice.
Yeah, I've seen those used, and it gets wild. We're severing heads,
Yeah.
losing limbs. These were the crits that you would talk about for weeks with your friends. Now, exploding dice, they literally, like, you could roll a D6 and roll a 6 and roll another 6 and roll another 6. It could happen and sometimes did. And when it did, oh man, that was exciting. That was cool.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that case is it's not a case where you're doing critical damage as a result of the to hit roll like D&D does. You're doing critical damage because you happen to get a lucky damage roll.
Yes.
And so then that became critical because you just happen to roll really well and keep rolling really well.
Yeah.
And that's another way to do it. Another way to do it is not related to damage at all. It could be that a critical strike gives you, or a critical success of many kinds gives you some kind of a meta currency, right? In Savage Worlds, for example, they have bennies, and other systems they have little meta currencies that you can acquire, and they give you the ability to do things. Sometimes that might be a reroll. Sometimes that might be a little dramatic edit to the scene, right? So
Gotcha.
That's an interesting thing to do, because then you can start thinking outside the damage transaction back and forth, and you can start thinking about ways that the whole game could change in some way.
And it also gives you a little something for later in the game that you could use in some function too. Maybe enhance a scene. Maybe it's not even battle related. You have a Benny that you could spend to make it successful, and a persuasion check of some sort. I don't know.
That actually brings us to another topic, which is critical skill rolls. So we've been talking about critical success in terms of combat, like to hit rolls and damage and things like that. But talk for a minute about critical skill rolls.
If you're playing a fantasy game, how many games players have tried of making or crafting some great item? And criticals is that window into that opportunity. When you roll a crit, something special happens. Just like in combat, but here we are applying it to a non-combat scenario. And it can be quite exciting. You got yourself potentially a magic item if you're crafting to build something, or maybe you're using it to persuade somebody or use a skill, perception. Maybe you spot something really minute, a clue that nobody else would get. This is an opportunity for the GM to drop some bit of knowledge that maybe they've been hanging on to that they really want to reveal to some players.
Critical skill rolls give you a chance to have great moments that are outside of combat.
Mhm.
A lot of people will play these games, and the biggest kind of activity that you think about the most when you're thinking about a D&D game, or frankly lots of other games, is what's going to happen when it comes to fighting. But here's a mechanical way that you can frankly spread that emphasis around. You can help people get more interested in other parts of the game besides the hack and slash parts. So critical skill rolls are great.
We had a game just about a month ago or so where players were doing some crafting. They had a little downtime, and I think we had about 4 players all looking to do some crafting, and 3 of the 4 players rolled criticals. Boy, I tell you what, as GM, I was excited, but I was very flat-footed and had to come up with some fun stuff on the spot. And that is, for me, that is a lot of fun. So it's funny that we were just kind of talking about it, and it happened just recently.
Let's think about the other end of the spectrum now, too. What about critical failures, Mark? Do you like critical failures in your games? People rolling ones or the lowest possible results and having penalties of various kinds for that?
Not particularly. Critical failure is always a failure, first of all. If you roll a 1 on a D20, that's not good. And usually that's enough. But I do like to narrate it as horrible as it could be. But I don't really usually apply any sort of negative. There could be situations where I might, but just in general, I don't like to penalize people when they missed. But we do like to make a little fun out of it.
So it might be that you don't necessarily want to do a lot mechanically, or at least nothing like a mirror image of the critical success tables and things like that,
Well,
right?
I've played in games with that. Don't get me wrong, Ben. I've
Yeah.
played in games where we had critical fumble tables, and they were real fun, and we all enjoyed it. And I would 100% do it again. I just don't think my players have the appetite for such a thing.
Okay. So this goes back to then, what is your players into?
Exactly. And I have yet to see players with the appetite for critical fumbles at all.
I will say it is a very old school sensibility. It's the kind of thing that you tended to see in earlier editions of games. Rollmaster, as we've said, had its own fumble tables that could frankly kill you if you rolled low enough. You remember we talked about exploding dice. You could actually explode downward if you fumbled and then fumbled again. You just trip and break your neck, and that was it for your game.
Yeah, we had. So. I do remember playing Rollmaster, and one of our old friends back in college, we spent. I mean, Rollmaster took a while to make characters, and he comes running out the gate after a whole day of making a character, critically fumbles with a Morning Star so badly that he brained himself, and his character was done.
Oh no.
It was his first swing out the gate. And we all just started laughing. We're like, oh man. But I mean, we're laughing now, but poor Rob.
Oh. Well, wherever you are, Rob, we hope you've had many successes since then. But I think that's a good point, right? In one sense, the tone that you're setting with a critical fumble is that, hey, maybe these guys aren't exactly heroes. There's a lot of moments when even a heroic character might miss or something might happen, but generally speaking, they shouldn't trip over their own shoes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it realistically, if Steph Curry was he's not rolling crit fumbles ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's hope not.
Yeah, we're talking about heroes here in the game. A 1 in 20 chance to roll a horrible crit fumble seems really high.
Yeah. So, okay, look, we're talking about things we want to be careful of. What are some other things that we need to be thoughtful about?
Let's talk about some player expectations and those genre expectations, because criticals might not fit into all genres of games, right?
If you're trying to run a really grounded game, I expect that criticals that sort of vastly expand on the result that you might get from a normal hit is probably not going to go with the genre well.
You come across as a little cartoonish if you're trying to play something grounded and gritty.
Player expectations also matter too. Players will often want a very predictable kind of game. It depends on the players you're with. I've played with some people that were very kind of technical and tactical, and really dramatic critical results would have been really tough for them because it would have meant that there was a lot of the game that you couldn't get your arms around. And a big part of that too is that crits are a two-way street. Criticals are something the monsters can do. And a lot of players have a harder time kind of taking crits than giving them. And so it may be that even if they do like being able to give the crits, they really don't like taking them. And so for that reason, you might just not do it in the first place. But Mark, would you ever have a game where only players could do crits and monsters could not?
No. Why would I do that? That's ridiculous. Let's make a game that's no fun for the GM.
I see.
No, I would not do that. I would say, no, I'm not running that game. I will say, though, like you said, the GM, his monsters get to roll crits. And I've seen games where my dice were hot. I've wiped out groups with it. Not necessarily just crits, but just in general. When your dice are hot, they're hot. So it's it can be demoralizing for some players sometimes when they're taking it on the chin.
Sometimes the dice speak, and we've talked about this in a past episode recently, like when the dice say die. So I think one of the things to do is to be careful about what crits can do in your game. And you might need to house rule some things to soften the edges of some of these things. Or, if they're not consequential enough to make players wary about them or be thoughtful, then maybe you want to amp them up in some ways. Or frankly, you might even want to just change the effects. One of the things I remember we did with the old Rollmaster game was we noticed that there were a lot of those criticals that would stun a character for multiple rounds.
Yeah. Not fun.
Yeah, it just takes people out of the game.
Yeah, and as a GM, it doesn't take you out of the game because you got other monsters you can kind of, use. So you're never like, don't have anything to do. But when you're a player and you're waiting 4 or 5 turns for other people, and now you got to wait a whole nother round. I mean, you just got reversed Uno'd. You know what I mean? Like you're not playing that round, and it's not fun. And that means players might disengage,
Yeah, I was going to say if each round is like 15 minutes even, then being out for 4 rounds means you just missed an hour of gameplay out of what might be, I don't know, 4-hour, 5-hour session at best.
Brutal. Better believe that person's phone's coming out and they're, side texting or playing a game or doing something because that's boredom right there.
And relatedly then, recovering from criticals is something that matters too. One of the things I always thought was hilarious about the old Rollmaster tables was that they would say like, oh yeah, you've slashed through this person's tendons or that person's lungs have exploded, or they'd have some like complex anatomical thing. And you're like, how in the world do you heal that?
Yeah,
and the Rollmaster thing would say like, they had all these really complex lists for what kind of healing you could do, right? They had spells for healing nerve damage or for healing, cartilage or whatever, and I was just like, wow. So one of the things I think we always wanted to be smart about was like, don't introduce criticals that you don't have the healing mechanics in the game to resolve.
You can regrow your limbs, but you can never regrow that self-esteem that you lost.
No. So think about how you want to help people recover when they've taken those criticals. Is that something that's going to happen in the course of the combat because they make a saving throw? Is it going to be something that happens later because they've taken a long-term injury? That's going to have a lot to do with how gritty this game is, how heroic your characters feel, and so forth. So think about that kind of stuff when you're putting this together.
If you're bringing something in from another game, you really got to think about how those roles might not match up very well. So give it a lot of thought before you just say, oh, I love this crit system from this game. I'm going to bring it in. Well, they may not be applicable. So just think about it.
Yeah, dear listener, if you're kind of getting the vibe that we brought Rollmaster into our D&D games at some point, we did. And it was great, but oh my gosh, did we have to do some work to make that an actual workable solution for us.
I want to talk about one other last little bit. This is the Jeff thing. Jeff always states why he doesn't like crits or crit charts is because the GM rolls more crits than the players.
Okay.
I don't believe that to be true necessarily. I would say potentially if you're fighting against armies and armies of things. But I would also argue that if you're fighting against armies and armies of things, those numbers are a lot more terrifying with a threat of crits out there. And that in itself is, to me, adds a little flavor to an otherwise, encounter that you would think might be one-sided.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe an example here would kind of illustrate. So let's imagine that we've got a party of 4 characters, and let's imagine that they're going to come against 10 goblins, let's say, right? So the idea is that in any given round, you might think that the GM is going to be able to roll 10 hits and the players are going to be able to roll 4. Jeff's thought here is that if the GM's rolling 10 and the players are rolling 4, then the odds that the GM's going to roll a critical are much higher over time. Is that the gist of it?
That's the gist of it. And he's not wrong.
Okay.
My argument would be, if you were in the real world, you're going to go take on 10 people, and you're just the 4 of you or whatever you are, you might have to think about some tactics.
Okay. So that thing that Jeff points out as a flaw, you're actually saying that's a feature, not a bug.
That's exactly right. It's a feature, not a bug. So that's where the whole, how many 12-year-olds can you fight, Ben?
Yeah, a lot, I would think. I don't know.
15. I don't know. If there's crits, they could get a lucky hit in, Ben. Every one of
Okay.
those kids. Let me just put it this way, though. It's very much the same problem with the zombie movies.
Right.
Zombie movies, the threat is not, there's 4 zombies. Well, that's not a problem. It's 10 zombies. It's now 20. Oh my gosh. There's now 50 zombies coming at us. That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, so Jeff, if you're out there listening, Mark just played the Uno reverse card. I think he's calling your bug a feature. So let's move on. There's one last thing that's kind of fun about crits, and this is something that's player driven. Mark, how do you want to do this?
Oh, yeah. I love player narration. It's so fun. I mean, I like to narrate as a GM, but there's some players who just love to narrate the crits, and you got to give them that opportunity. So that's a good chance for some storytelling too.
Giving your players a chance to do a little bit of storytelling is something that helps them feel like they own the game, and it keeps them really engaged.
Hey, Ben, I got one for you here.
All right.
This one is, man, I feel this one too. I got to be honest with you.
I think we talked about this one before.
Yeah, my players, the person writes, my players attack villains on sight. What are some clever ways I can have some parlay between heroes and villain?
Not to be too cheeky, but you could always have a dark room if they attack on sight. I'm only slightly kidding there, though, right? Like, there's lots of ways you can create communication without proximity. And so when we were talking about villains, you remember we talked about insulating your villains. I think that was your term, and I like that idea. Mm-hmm. We could put the villain in a situation where the players can't attack that person without basically turning everybody against them at a high society dinner, let's say, where nobody knows that guy's the villain except for the players. If they decide to attack, then they're probably going to get in real trouble with the mayor or the whoever, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could have walls between them in some capacity, maybe a locked door, and they're speaking through a portcullis or something of that nature. Just give them a little time to parlay while they're trying to pick that lock.
One of the things that movies do a lot, and it's really good, we saw this in Skyfall with the villain played by Javier Bardem. We saw this in Silence of the Lambs with Anthony Hopkins. Put the villain in a plastic box, in a cage, in some kind of confinement that the players don't think they need to kill the villain because he's already, been confined. He's already dealt with in some sense, but they need to go talk to him to get information. And then they realize the villain's got all kinds of things going on outside the bounds of his cage, or he's got all kinds of knowledge that they need to find a way to get. And no amount of pressure will extract that.
Bruce Willis had some good parlaying on the walkie-talkie with his nemesis in Die Hard.
With Hans Gruber.
Yeah, I mean, they were going back and forth there.
Die Hard's a good example.
Yeah, and so you can have these things. You just got to kind of think outside the box a little bit. I think one of the ones we were kind of joking about is you could have these guys meet up in a confession booth. What a great place. Maybe the sanctity of the church might prevent them from falling into, the fact that maybe there's other people there at the church might prevent them from out and out fighting right there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the characters and the players in the game too. I think if you've got a paladin in that church, I think you're okay. But I think most rogues are going to start trying to stab their way through the confessional at that point.
Yeah. Of course, that may be also a classic for like a character like Daredevil, where
Right.
religious themes are kind of apparent in that realm.
And relatedly, that's a nice point. Daredevil is an individual character. So one thing you could do is you could have characters be met by a villain when they're isolated or by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're thinking, well, gosh, if I had my party with me, I could do some things. But by myself with this overpowered big bad guy, I don't know if I want to start a fight.
Or maybe he catches them in a moment where their hit points are low, they're weakened, and they can't start a fight because they will lose. Give your villain the little upper hand there. This is his chance to strike up that conversation while they're gasping for air. So, folks, I think that hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. I think it helps me think about it at least.
Definitely. And if you want to get more insight into your interesting open questions about anything to do with the GM and craft, whether it's world building or table management or anything else, email us at tabletoptuneup@gmail.com. And we will take up that question the next time we see you. Until then, keep those dice rolling.
quest has now begun. Tune up, we'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune quest has now begun. Tune up, we'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up. Come get your tune up. It's time for your tune. Your game needs a tool.